You know, from everything I've learned from reading the Bible, my own personal experience, and hearing the stories of so many others, I have just learned that debt is like a prison door. But the good news is the Bible reminds us that generosity is the key. Now, I want to talk to you for a few moments about generosity because for some of us, that just seems so far out of reach. We're just barely scraping by. So, generosity, how does it really work? Well, what I've learned is that really it starts by putting God first. The first question you need to ask yourself is, where does my source come from? Where do my finances, my money really come from? You know, I heard a story of people out to sea, and they say if you're surviving in the ocean, the worst thing you can do is drink seawater, even if you're dying of thirst, because it contains 4 times the amount of salt your body can properly process. The irony is that by trying to quench your thirst, you actually die of dehydration. And what I've learned, it's kind of like that with our money. When we look to any other source than God, we think that somehow that will satisfy that need, and it just never works. Jesus reminded us of this in Matthew 6:24, when he said, "No one can serve 2 masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and wealth." And so you need to figure out where your source is first and foremost. But then second, I've learned that you have to live with an attitude of gratitude. I had a friend who told me a great story. He wanted to treat his child to McDonald's, and so he took his child out. They were sitting there. He ordered not just fries, like extra size, like the extra large fries. And as those fries were sitting in front of the child, he had the audacity, in his child's mind, to reach across and take one fry. And the child lost his mind. He said, those are my fries. My friend thought, really? And I think when it comes to our reality of resources, often we think that about our stuff too, don't we? This is my stuff. I worked hard for this. And then when God steps in and says, "I'd really like you to be generous," we have a hissy fit. Well, that's not how this works. You've got to understand that God is your provider. He is the source. I love the way Paul says it in 1 Timothy 1:6. He said, "But godliness with contentment is great gain." You see, we have to distinguish between what is a need and what is a want. When my children were 2 years old, they wanted candy. They thought that was a need, especially just before bedtime. And I, being a loving father, knew that was not a need, it was a want. And so I would deny them. Not because I didn't like them or love them and want the best for them. Quite the opposite was true. And it's the same with God. We're reminded of this in Philippians 4:19, where it says, "And God will supply every need of yours, according to his riches in glory in Christ Jesus." And so I've learned to be content with what God has given me. And then, as you heard from Lori, we need to be wise stewards of what we have been given. You see, here's what I'm learning. You've got to live with an open hand. A closed fist around your stuff will always terminate itself. You must live with an open hand. And so I want to encourage you to be generous. To be generous, understanding that God is my source, He is my provider, and He gives me all of these things so that I can give them away. Be blessed with that powerful truth today.